Hello, my name's Georgina Wilding and I am Nottingham's first Young Poet Laureate. As you can imagine, that means that I am fascinated with the power of poetry and how poetry is crossing borders, both past, present and future. So far, I've managed to work with organisations such as the Wildlife Trust, the BBC. I've travelled to places such as Poland, Germany, Spain, all in search of how people are using poetry to represent themselves and to further the genre. I recently heard about a groundbreaking, discipline-straddling project that mixes computer coding with poetry to create a free, fascinating resource for scientists, poets, and everyone in between. It's called the Ada Lovelace Poetry Engine, and I decided to find out more. I'm off to meet Dr. Eleanor Turpin, the originator of the idea, at Bromley House Library in the centre of Nottingham.
So I wanted to do something to mark Ada Lovelace Day, which is a day to celebrate women in science, and I also wanted to bring in Nottingham's literary legacy, so with Lord Byron, who was Ada Lovelace's father. And I also wanted to try and bring something together that combined both science, like computer science, and poetry, bring the arts and the sciences together. So a lot of people, right from when they're at school, think either, I'm like a maths person or a science person, the arts isn't for me, and vice versa. People think, I like arts, I like creativity, I can't really do anything scientific. So part of the idea of the project is try to bring like the two cultures together and get people sort of swapping ideas, swapping experience. So particularly, there's a lot done to try and get young people into science, but actually I also want to try and get sort of scientific people kind of interested in creativity.
But who is Ada Lovelace? To find out more, I visited Thrumpton Hall by the River Trent, Ada's former home, to meet Miranda Seymour, biographer and an expert on Ada. So the first question really is just to ask you, who was Ada Lovelace?
Ada was the daughter of Lord Byron, the poet who was mad, bad and dangerous to know, as Caroline Lamb, one of his most obstreperous girlfriends, said.
Yeah.
And she was born from a marriage which only lasted for 1 year, very ill-fated marriage. Byron was in a very, very volatile state. He'd lost a lot of money. He was trying to get the money back to keep Newstead Abbey, which of course is Nottinghamshire. And his wife, threatened with attacks on herself and on the baby, fled from their house in London, took little Ada, aged about 4 weeks old, to Leicestershire, which is where Lady Byron's family had a house. And that's where little Ada spent her first years. And Ada, in fact, never knew her father. She was only 7 years old when Byron was killed in 1824. Mm-hmm. But I think that all her life she was kind of under the spell of her father and his glamour and his reputation and his brilliance. And although she never became a poet, she found her way to, some would say nowadays, actually to surpass him in the field of mathematics.
What was her kind of big idea when you touched on the mathematics?
So Ada's big idea came when she was in her early 30s. She had, throughout her adult life, been encouraged by her mother to study mathematics. Not really because Lady Byron thought she was going to be a brilliant mathematician, but because it was a way of controlling Ada's really quite wild personality. She was very much her father's child. She'd already tried to elope when she was about 16, and the New York Times had written her up as the wickedest young woman in England.
Wow.
So the idea of maths was to calm Ada down. And Ada very quickly showed an extraordinary aptitude and grasp of mathematical principles that was unlike anything that her teachers had seen before. And her first tutor was a wonderful woman called Mary Somerville, who was actually revered by all the people in the Royal Society who were men. But Mary, being a woman, couldn't even go into the Royal Society. And Mary, in 1838, went off to live in Italy, where they had a much greater respect for female scientists and mathematicians. And Ada then turned to an extraordinary man called Augustus de Morgan. And it's really in a letter that he wrote to Ada's mother in 1844 that we grasp just how extraordinary Ada was. Because he said to Ada's mother, Ada can go beyond us all, man or woman. There is no telling what worlds she may not grasp. Now, this was the year after Ada had taken on the invitation to translate a paper about an engine built by Charles Babbage,
Wow.
which actually had not been built. This is what I find incredible. Charles Babbage, since the 1820s, had been plotting an amazing statistical machine which could be used by the government, and statistics were becoming a very big deal in Victorian times with the empire and all the sort of statistics to be done, and they just hadn't got the machinery to keep up with the progress they were making. So Babbage devised first what was called the difference engine, of which Ada saw a tiny little piece in 1833 in his rooms where he would have parties to raise money for the machines. She had completely ignored Babbage's Silver Lady, which was an automaton which was meant to bow and curtsy and amuse young ladies. Ada was not any young lady. She walked straight past the Silver Lady and said, "Show me the machine."
Wow.
Looked at this tiny little bit of machinery, I mean, as big as my hand, and immediately, this is the extraordinary thing about her, she immediately grasped its potential. And in 1833, 1834, Babbage started thinking about a more sophisticated machine called the analytical engine. Babbage saw a machine that had never been built. It was just drawings on a piece of paper. He saw a super statistics engine. The government saw a very stroppy, difficult man who they were sick to death of hearing from. He had a filthy temper. And they would have nothing to do with it. Babbage took his idea out to Europe, where they were so much more sympathetic to ideas, went out to Turin, where the King of Sardinia had gathered together a big conference of mathematicians and scientists, all of whom were fascinated by what he described. And a man called Luigi Menabrea, who would later become the Italian ambassador to France, wrote up Babbage's description in French. This is where Ada comes in. A man called Charles Wheatstone, knowing of Ada's incredibly intelligent mind and grasp of things, and also the frustration for her of just being a posh woman, Lady Lovelace, with nothing to occupy this brilliant mind of hers, suggested that she should translate Menabrea's paper into English so that the government could have another look and think about Babbage's engine. Ada did it. Babbage was absolutely thrilled. He said Lady Lovelace had done something beyond his wildest dreams. In fact, it was so good, he said, would Ada go on and add appendices of her own, commenting on what she thought the machine could do.
Oh my goodness.
Well, it tells you how much Ada took this to heart when you think that the original Menabrea document is 61 pages. 44 of those pages are Ada's notes.
Oh my goodness.
Ada had inherited her mathematical powers from her mother. Byron referred to Lady Byron as the princess of parallelograms.
Wow.
So she was quite something in maths. But from her father, she got the imagination. And Ada, just before she undertook this thing, had written an essay about imagination, in which she said that she thought science could only move forward if science and imagination were combined. And that's what Ada did. She took this unbuilt machine and she imagined what it could do.
To find out how the idea of Ada's Poetry Engine became a reality, I visited the University of Nottingham Centre for Biomolecular Sciences to meet Dr. Christian Zeus, who headed up the team to code the project into being. A little bit about how it actually works. How does your coding spit out a poem?
So initially we started by looking at sort of common. We wanted to just sort of get a computer to generate a completely random poem, but we didn't want it to just be anything. We wanted it to have, say, to actually resemble a poem. So we started to look at common sentence structures of poems. So we'd look at like how they'd be laid out. So we'd look at adjectives, prepositions, nouns. And so we kind of got a list of those words, and then we created an algorithm which could put them all together.
Wow.
And then it would give you hopefully a sensible poem.
Wow, I love that. It's kind of an academic look at.
Yeah, so it was very, very rigid, but what we wanted people to be a lot more creative with it. So we just decided, well, we've got this, we can create a random poem using a computer, but we wanted the user to create their own poem and then kind of create something completely disordered from that and just see what they came out with. It was quite a fun experiment for us, and I think when we demonstrated it at the library and at Broadway, we got some really fun answers.
When your programme spits out a poem at the end, do you see the poem and do you feel the emotion from those words, or do you see coding?
So I think because I primarily wrote all the code, I see the code.
Yes.
So I know exactly what happens. And when someone shows me their final result, I was like, oh, that was that algorithm I wrote. Oh, that was that.
Nice.
But yeah, I'm starting to see it more as see both code and the actual
And
the poem.
The question of all questions is, should I be worried that there is eventually going to be a robot poet laureate?
Well, we've already developed an engine that can do it, but then I'm also worried that the robot's going to be stealing my job as well. So.
Okay, I've uploaded my poem to the site. Now what?
Right, again, so what we can do is we can go down to our drop-down list, and this is retrieving all the poems that are on our database.
Oh wow.
These have all been created by people in Nottingham at the Festival of Science of Curiosity.
Brilliant.
So we can go down to yours and Freaker Hopper of Walls.
Yeah, that's me.
So we just load that up. So that's now appeared in our text box here.
Oh, exciting!
So then we can click Make My Poem.
Yes.
And so now if we scroll down, we have your original poem here at the bottom.
Scorched bee bellies. What?
So if you
That's
so
great.
if you like scorched bee bellies, you can now click on that word and we can click like.
Ooh.
So now every time it reshuffles, it's going to keep scorched bee bellies together. So if you keep doing that over many iterations, you're going to be able to start to build your poem. So yeah, especially with scorched bee bellies.
Oh, that's so cool.
So yeah, every time you want to shuffle it,
I am Dewey. That's great. This is so clever. I love to write all of my poems using this poetry engine and see what happens. This is so great.
So my big hope really is that the young people who took part as part of the Festival of Science perhaps will go away a little bit with the idea that they can combine both sort of computer science and science with creativity and poetry. But also, you know, we're keeping the website live, so if anyone else fancies being creative and having a go and doing some poetry evolution, please feel free.
This vivacious character that you're speaking of, and that for me is one of the reasons why she's so magical, is that she's got this beautiful mix of both of those things, which is just absolutely brilliant.
It's wonderful, isn't it? And really, reading Ada's letters, you really get the sense of how much she is her father's daughter, because Byron, often people say Byron was just the best letter writer in the world. They're so immediate and so vital. And Ada has exactly that gift. You just feel that she's right here with us now. She's so modern. There's one wonderful letter when she's hard at work on her notes, and she describes herself living in London, and she says, I'm just going to pop out to Oxford Street to get a sandwich. And I remember when I read that, I sort of jumped, and I had to think, God, this is 1843. And she sounds like a woman from 2018, and Ada does this all the time, and that's, I think, why she's so significant to us today, because we can connect to her.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Transcends time.